Alright, so number 94, x squared equals 28 minus 3x. So this is our quadratic equation we're going to solve by factoring. So first, we need to set this equal to 0, right? Because the zero factor rule only works when this is set equal to 0. So this should be a 3x minus 28 equals 0. Okay, so we move the terms on the right-hand side to the left-hand side, right? Okay, so now our a here is positive 1. We can continue to factor, right? This one is one of our easier factoring problems. So we look for the factors of negative 28, that's our c, and those factors have to have a sum of positive 3. That means one is negative, one is positive, and the larger factor should be positive, right? So let's list out factors of 28 here. We got 1 and 28, 2 and 14. So we got 30, let's see, 4, 3, and 6, 4, and 7. Let's see here, what else? 28. Okay, so let's just write the 4 and the 7, and we said that the larger has to be positive, so this is negative 4. Those are our factors, right? So we have x minus 4 times x plus 7 equals 0, right? And you set each factor equal to 0 using our 0 factor rule, right? And then solve for x. So you add 4 here, you get x is 4. You subtract 4 here, and you get x is, subtract 7 here, and you get negative 7. Okay, any questions with that problem? Okay, let's move on then. Number 96. So in this problem, we have a quadratic, right? X squared equals 12x. So we can subtract 12x on both sides, and that's equal to 0. Since there are two terms, you look for the GCF, right? So with the GCF, you have x, and the other factor is x minus 12, right? So you have two factors, right? So you set each factor equal to 0. The first one, x is equal to 0, and the second is x minus 12 equal to 0. Solve for x. So the first one's done. Second one, you just add 12. So you get 12. X equals 12. Okay, so two solutions right here. Any problems with 96? Otherwise, we can move on. 97, x squared minus 25 equals 0. Hopefully by now, we can all recognize this as the difference of two squares, right? We have your x squared minus 5 squared, right? So that's our, difference of squares, right? So that always factors to x plus 5 times x minus 5 equals 0. Then we set each factor equal to 0. So x plus 5 equals 0, or x minus 5 equals 0, and solve for x. So we have two solutions. X is equal to negative 5, or x is equal to positive 5, right? And when we have a positive and negative case, right, we can write it as a plus or minus symbol, right? That's what we learned on Monday. Very good. Number 99. So a is greater than 1. First, I want to just double check. Is there a greatest common factor? No, there isn't, right? So then you can move on to a different form of factoring. You could either do the trial and error method, which I prefer, or the AC method, right? And most students tend to prefer that. So this is already set equal to 0, so we can begin factoring. So AC, I'll do that on the left here, is 2 times negative 3 equals negative 6. And we have to find the factors of AC that add up to B equals negative 1. So that means we have two numbers, right? One is positive, one is negative. Since b is negative, the larger factor is negative, right? So already I can see that 2 times negative 3 equals 6, and 2 minus 3 equals negative 1, right? So what I'll do is replace the b, right, the middle term, with those two, the 2x and the minus 3x. So we have 2x squared plus 2x minus 3x minus 3 is equal to 0. Then we have 4 terms, so we can factor by grouping, right? The first group, find the GCF, you should get 2x, and your other factor is x, plus 1. In the second group, your leading term is negative, so you should factor a negative out, which in this case is negative 3, and you get x plus 1. Right? So of the two terms, there's the common binomial factor of x plus 1. So you can write x plus 1 times 2x minus 3 is equal to 0. So set each factor equal to 0 using our zero factor rule. So x plus 1 equals 0, and 2x minus 3 equals 0. And we can begin to solve for x. So in the first one, you subtract 1. You get x is equal to negative 1. The second factor, you add 3. So you get 2x equals 3. X is equal to 3 over 2. So now we have two solutions, right? X equals negative 1, or x equals positive 3 over 2. All right, very nice. So let's move on to 100. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here, make it easier to write. Okay. Now, this problem, 3x squared minus 4x equals 15. We have to first set it equal to 0 before we do anything, right? So let's rewrite this. We have 3x squared minus 4x, and then we have to subtract 15 to both sides. So that's equal to 0. Then I look for a possible GCF, which I don't see any. Therefore, I can continue to factor by grouping, right? So I'm sorry, not factor by grouping, AC method, right? So I have AC is 3 times negative 15, which equals negative 45. And I have B, that's equal to negative 4, right? So by this time, I hope you guys are pretty quick enough to see, right? This is 45 is 9 and 5, right? So this is negative, therefore the larger number should be negative. So 5 and negative 9 gives you negative 4, right? So we can now replace the middle term with 5x minus 9x. So we have 3x squared plus 5x minus 9x minus 15 is equal to 0. We begin to factor by grouping. First GCF is x. So we have 3x plus 5. The second group, the leading coefficient is again negative. Therefore, we need to factor out a negative GCF, right? And the GCF of 9 and 15 is 3. So we have 3x plus 5 equals 0. Now in the two terms, we have the common binomial factor of 3x plus 5. And the second factor is x minus 3. Right? So now we can set each factor equal to 0. Right? 3x plus 5 is equal to 0. We have x minus 3 is equal to 0. And solve for x. So 3x, we subtract 5, so we get is equal to negative 5. And then divide by 3, you get negative 5 over 3. The second factor, you just add 3 and you get x is equal to positive 3. And we have our two solutions. Okay, any questions up to this point? All right, I'm going to move on to the last problem, 101. Okay. So I look at 101 and I see that it's already set equal to 0. So now I can begin my factoring strategies, right? First thing I notice is three terms. I look for the greatest common factor, right? I see that there's a 3. So I'll factor out the 3 first, and I get x squared plus 3x minus 10 is equal to 0. So remember, when your GCF in a quadratic equation is a non-variable, you can divide this 3 out on both sides. So 3 divided by 3 is a 1, right? And 0 divided by 3 is still 0. So basically, I'm left with a very simple factoring problem. X squared plus 3x minus 10 is equal to 0. See, now the a is equal to 1, which makes this a much easier factoring problem, right? So I look for the factors of negative 10 that can add up to 3. And I see that those factors are negative 2 and positive 5, right? So my factors are x minus 2 times x plus 5 is equal to 0. And we can set each factor equal to 0. Then solve for x. So we add 2 to both sides. X is equal to positive 2. Subtract 5 here, and you get x is equal to negative 5. So we have two solutions, right? X is equal to 2 or x is equal to negative 5. So that wraps up our factoring, um, solving quadratic equations by factoring. Do you have any questions on this chapter?